Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fostering Connections, Mentoring for Youth in Foster Care and Transition. First and foremost, we want to thank you, Robin, for inviting us to participate in this True Colors mini-con, the first of its kind. So thank you for joining us this week in, I think, what is week 3 of the series. And we appreciate you taking time to hear more about mentoring for youth in foster care, particularly those who have LGBTQ identities. And if you bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to share my screen and we can hop into the presentation. So you should be seeing our title slide, Fostering Connections, Mentoring Youth in Foster Care and Transition. And before we go any further, I'm going to go ahead and play our organization video so you can get an understanding of who we are.
I knew right away. I was just like, yep, this is my girl.
How many coffee shops do you think we've been to?
We're trying 70? To catch like at least,
70 maybe.
Silver Lining Mentoring is the only mentoring organization in Massachusetts that exclusively serves young people in foster care.
The mentoring is a one-on-one experience, and it's highly personal and intimate. We're giving of ourselves a little piece of our psyche, of our time, and of our emotional life to someone who just wants to be paid attention to and just wants some advice.
Young people in foster care are managing a lot of change. That is the constant for them. It's transition after transition.
I've had 4 social workers in 3 years. I've had 6 different foster homes in 4 years, and that's just homes I've lived in for more than a month.
Well, they don't know me. I gotta tell my story all over again. It's somebody new. It's hard starting over. I've been from school to school, bouncing back and forth.
I've been in 4 respits, moved in 6 different cities. While Larry's Larry, he's there, he's stable, that's the word I would use. He's the stable thing, the thing that no matter where I go in Massachusetts, he will still be there.
Kids in foster care, they get pushed to the bottom. Silver Lining is an organization that helps pick them up.
We're really proud that our young people are graduating high school at twice the rate of their peers in foster care and finding employment at 3 times the rate of their peers. And we attribute that to the longevity of our match relationships, because it's our mentors who are sticking it out with young people over the long term and reminding them of their goals and staying with them when they're thinking about that long-term vision for what they want to achieve. Our mentors are cheering them on every step of the way. At Silver Lining, we're proud that our average match length is over 6 times the national average at 55 months. So our mentors are going the distance because they're incredibly committed and dedicated to our young people.
Being a mentor is an incredible experience. I mean, you learn so much about yourself, you learn so much about other people.
My relationship with Savannah, or Say, as I call her, is based on friendship. I feel like I am always excited to see her and hear what's going on in her life.
It's always consistent. I know when I text her, she's gonna answer. I know when I call her, she'll pick up the phone, and if she doesn't, she'll call me back.
Our mentors end up being the relationship historian for our young people, getting to introduce them to the first milestones in their lives, the first things that many of us take for granted, but that become such important memories in their relationships.
She didn't understand how to save money. She didn't understand the process of housing. She didn't understand a lot of those things. And those things that I took for granted, because those were things that I knew and were shared with me by my parents. But how do you know how to do that if no one ever tells you?
Not everybody has like family or a best friend or even like a sister that they can really connect to, but if you have a mentor, it's like having that your favorite cousin, it's just like, it's always a good vibe. That's all it is. It's just a positive thing.
Silver Lining Mentoring makes sure that network is available for kids and young adults who don't necessarily have that sort of a lifeline and that sort of a communication channel for sharing the ups and downs of life.
The fact that our mentors are volunteers is especially important for our population of young people in foster care, because our mentors are the only adults in their worlds who are not paid to be there. And our mentors are the ones who are showing up, not because it has anything to do with the paycheck, but because they're deeply invested in that young person.
My mentor helped me out when I go when I got issues at home, I call him and he helped me out with everything. And I really help him be my mentor for life.
It is one of the best and most fulfilling relationships in my life, and it never would have happened without Silver Lining Mentoring.
As I think about what my hopes and dreams are for Chanel and all the other young people that are in foster care, I want them to find hope in the relationships that they have with each of us as mentors. I want them to know that they are of value and worth to this world. We believe in you.
At Silver Lining Mentoring, we envision a world where every young person in foster care has someone they can count on when the going gets rough. Because we know that young people thrive when they matter. We all thrive when we matter.
We thrive when we matter.
We thrive when we matter.
We thrive when we matter.
Prosperamos cuando importamos.
We thrive when we matter.
We thrive when we matter. And we all matter.
So that is just a brief overview of who we are as an organization. We essentially empower youth in foster care to thrive through committed mentoring relationships and the development of essential life skills. We were founded in 2002 by an alum of foster care and currently serve about 300 youth in 2019 in the greater Boston region. And those young people range in age from 7 years old to age 26. And we have additional supports in place for youth who are aged 26 and older. The majority of the youth who are served are in out-of-home care, whether that be in a traditional foster home or in independent living setting or something similar. Who I am, my name is Mobile Burrell. I'm an MSW. You can call me Mobes or Mo, and I go by any pronouns. I am an advocate for equity and a fierce believer in the possibility of creating a world that everyone feels great calling home. As such, I've had a variety of professional roles for over a decade, working on behalf of individuals who hold marginalized identities within the United States of America. That includes Black and Brown families, LGBTQ plus folks, youth impacted by the foster care system, individuals of all ages living with mental disabilities, and many more. I am a queer chocolate baby from the South on a lifelong pursuit of growth and improvement for a better environment for everyone to exist within. Currently, I use my name and identify as both pangender and pansexual. With that said, Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter, and welcome to our presentation. Our objectives for today and what brings us here is that we recognize that young people have a multitude of identities, and those intersections of identities and systemic bias impact how they experience the world. For LGBTQ youth, we know that they are overrepresented in the foster care system, and that youth who are in and impacted by care often miss the benefit of having consistent adult supports and community. So this workshop itself aims to highlight the importance of and more immediate impact of providing consistent mentoring relationships for youth in care. And by the end of this workshop, we hope that you understand the importance of mentoring for youth in care, particularly for LGBTQ youth in foster care, as well as other systems, and that you're able to build some skills or access resources if you're a staff member or if you're a mentor or working to support mentors to really do your best to support young people in care with LGBTQ identity. What you see now is a brief overview of our agenda. We'll spend a little bit of time going through this information, and hopefully you'll join us when we have our live panel hosted by Robin on Friday, June 12th. But for this workshop, we'll go over a brief mission, vision, and values for our organization and the model that we use to work with young people impacted by foster care. We'll also talk about the statistics related to the instability of foster care and what we know to be true for young people who are exiting that system and other systems like the foster care system. And we'll spend a brief amount of time looking at the elements of effective practice for mentoring as specific for youth impacted by foster care and LGBTQ youth. And then we'll briefly touch on some lessons that we've learned as an organization from our work with youth in the foster care system. And we'll invite you to connect with us even further afterwards. Very briefly on your screen, you'll see that our mission, vision, and values we are the only organization in Massachusetts exclusively focused on youth in foster care, as you heard Kobe say in our video. We have a very long match length for young people, and we're very purposeful about how we set up those relationships. We believe that consistent positive mentoring relationships with life skills, resource brokering, and leadership opportunities will help build resilience for young people impacted by care and resilience as defined through social connection, self-efficacy, social emotional skills, and building a sense of positive identity. And that overall will lead to healthy interconnectedness and interdependence for all young people. The Silver Lining Institute, you can definitely go to our website and check out more about who we are. But if you're interested in working with technical and training assistants from our organization to help your own programs, check out our website and look at Silver Lining Institute for a little bit more on how we can help you improve your best practices, look at systems change, or build an understanding of how young people who experience foster care experience the world overall. So you heard in our organizational video, Brendan, a young person, mentioned the types and numbers of placements that he's had over the years. If we were in person, I would ask you all to speculate on what you think the average number of placements are for youth in care who are in foster care for more than 2 years. And I would venture to guess that some folks might get it correct and others may be slightly off, and some might be even further off. But we know from research that 64.3% of young people who are in foster care for more than 2 years had more than 2 placements. That means they moved more than 2 times. We also, when we think about what those placements have been or where those young people have existed, we know that 45% of those are in non-relative foster family homes. That means they're waking up with people who they haven't maybe met before. They're complete strangers. Some young people, 32%, are in relative foster family homes. So maybe they have some folks that they are connected to by blood relation, but maybe they're not as close as they would be with the families of origin. And we also know that youth are in a variety of other placements as evidenced in this slide as well. A second question I might ask you if we were in person together are, what are some of the areas of young people's lives where you really see the effects of this instability show up? So knowing that youth in foster care are moving more frequently, they're in placements with unfamiliar people, what do you think some of the impacts might be of that? To answer that question for you, we know that we have consequent effects on things from educational achievement, identity development, mental health, as well as risky behaviors. We know that 56% of youth in foster care are youth who identify as not white. And we also know that LGBTQ youth are disproportionately represented among youth in foster care systems. When we think about Massachusetts specifically, the DCF annual report that was released in 2019 indicates that young people in the foster care system in Massachusetts are moved at a rate of nearly 8 moves per 1,000 days, or roughly 3 years. So 8 moves within 3 years is what young people in Massachusetts can expect. We also know that less than 40% of states are able to achieve the goal of 2 or fewer placement settings for children who are in care. And we recognize that this instability can have consequent impacts, and then you layer on different identity markers that increases these impacts. So we also recognize that the racial and ethnic breakdown of youth in care nationally, according to a survey, is that 44% of youth are white, 23% are Black, 23% or African American, 21% are Hispanic, 9% identify as other or multiracial, and 2% are unknown or unable to determine. So we think about what are the impacts of moving through the world with minority racial identities or as a person of the global majority. Some people may know this term as people of color. We also know that LGBTQ youth are higher represented in the foster care system. Some research also lets us know that there are more youth living in foster care and unstable housing who self-identified as LGBTQ than youth in a nationally representative sample. Some additional information: compared to heterosexual peers, LGBTQ youth in care have poorer school functioning, increased substance use, and poorer mental health. We also know that LGBTQ youth in care have more fights in school, victimization, and mental health problems compared not only with LGBTQ youth in stable housing, but also with heterosexual youth in foster care. And what this means is that the disparities for LGBTQ youth are exacerbated when they live in foster care or unstable housing. So before we dive deeper into why we're talking about these disproportionate impacts for youth in care, we'll hear from a young person who's experienced the foster care system. And this is taken from an article called Throwaway Kids that you can find, written by the Kansas City Star. And this young person is currently, at the time of recording, incarcerated and speaking about the impacts of growing up in the foster care system.
being taken from place to place and being sent to a whole new different city and a whole new different family and people that you've never met before, it's a really confusing experience. You just feel torn away from your community. It's like, just imagine that you were going to work one day and it's just a normal day and you're on your way to work and everything is as it's supposed to be, and you watered your dog and you drank your coffee and you tell your kids goodbye and you go to work, and then the police show up at your job and they say, okay, we're moving you to a totally different city and you don't know anybody and you can't call your family and you can't call any of your friends and you need to leave your phone here and you can't take any of your stuff with you. We'll figure that out later. And they just pick you up and they transport you to a totally different place and then tell you to just wait in this room for a little while because we're going to figure things out. And then they come and bring you a little sack luncheon and it's, oh, just a few more hours and we're going to figure this out. Just here, play with this little toy. Okay, put this little ring on a hook. And then they send you to these really well-meaning people but you have no idea who they are, and their house smells different, and maybe they have a dog, and they have hardwood floors, you've only ever had carpet. Like, everything about the experience is alien to you. And all you want is to be able to contact the people that you have a bond with. It's a very disrupting experience. And in a lot of ways, it's a traumatic experience because all of these things are unexpected, and suddenly everything in your world that you felt was safe and secure and concrete is not. And having those ideas shattered is really difficult, especially as a child, because you need that security. You need to know that here's my bed, I can come home to it, and this is where it's gonna be, and that's gonna be okay. Or here's my mom, and no matter what, she's gonna be there for me, and I can just call her and she'll show up, and that's gonna be okay. When you can't believe that anymore, it starts to make you question, well, what can you believe? Who can you trust? What is a for sure thing? You begin to stop valuing certain things. You stop valuing relationships because they're not concrete and they're not going to be there forever. And you stop investing yourself in certain things. And all of a sudden, stability isn't really important to you. Having goals isn't important to you. You are concerned with, where are you going to sleep tonight? Are you going to be safe? Who are these people? Doing a simple thing like taking a shower in a stranger's home is a very disconcerting experience. So the more that you get moved around, the more trauma that you endure in that. Every single move is a traumatic experience. So you can see the consequences later on. And really you can see the consequences pretty early on. As a child who's in foster care, I exhibited signs of not being able to trust other people, of not wanting to connect. I had some really antisocial behavior. I also had a deep dislike for government agencies, for the police, for social workers. Like, I did not believe that they were on my team, because when I'm telling you that this is what I need and you're just not listening and you're saying, well, this is what we feel you need, I can't trust you any longer. As a child, you do not have the capacity to forward think. You are not able to, and scientifically your brain isn't even wired to do that yet. And so the decisions that you're making are pure emotional. When you're dealing with a traumatic situation and when the people around you don't have the tools to help you deal with that, the decisions that you're making are pure instinctive. And so I just know that if I have this incredible amount of sadness and this incredible amount of fear and I don't know what to do with it, well, maybe I should just run away. Maybe I should do drugs. Maybe I should get in fights. Maybe I should cuss out my foster parents. There's all kinds of different things that happen. None of those things were planned. All of those things were unintended consequences because I didn't know how to deal with the original emotions that I was facing. And so I really just want people to understand that these kids just need help. I don't understand how there's so much funding for foster care benefits, for adoption benefits, for emergency shelters. There's so much funding for that, but there's no funding for family preservation. And had my mom just had a little bit of help, had she have had enough money to buy her own vehicle, had she had enough money to relocate herself from an abusive situation, had she not had to depend on men in the first place for any kind of financial stability, I don't believe that she would have made some of the decisions that she would have made. I don't believe that she would have struggled as a mother, because my mom is a good mom. She just had some hardships and she had nobody to help her. And so I don't understand how there's so much funding to take us away, but there's no funding to keep us there.
So when we think about stories like the young person in that video and young people who you saw in our organizational video and who we'll highlight in a little while, we recognize the deep importance of having consistent adult relationships available so that young people can learn critical skills that set them up for success in the future. So as an organization, we really focus on helping ourselves really stay aligned in ways that our young people who have various identities and intersect in various ways have access to mentors who can be a strong ally, who may report or reflect some of those identities, and who can stand up and show up for them when they really need it the most. So we spend a lot of time as an organization shaping our program around the elements of effective practice for mentoring. And this is a public publication that you can access on Mentor's website. And it's their cornerstone publication that details research-informed and practitioner-approved standards for creating and sustaining quality youth mentoring programs and consequently impactful mentoring relationships. And there are 6 evidence-based standards that are intended to be applicable across almost every type of youth mentoring program. And those are what you see on the screen in front of you. And each standard includes benchmarks to ensure that the safety and effectiveness of mentoring relationships, as well as enhancements that might be promising or innovative and useful for programs. So for the rest of this presentation, we'll go through briefly each of the elements in context of supporting mentoring for youth impacted by foster care systems, and particularly those who are LGBTQ youth as well. And that first element we think about is recruitment. So the recruitment of mentors, and some things that we pay attention to as an organization are mentors' commitment and stable lifestyle, making sure that mentors have a job that's going to keep them in the area long enough to commit to at least 1 year of a matched relationship with a young person. We also make sure we're looking at self-awareness, making sure that they can meet rejection or challenge or change with consistency. And this is all intentional because we know for young people impacted by foster care that they're going to need people who are consistently showing up and sticking true to what they say. And we focus really heavily on people who are already coming into our pool saying, I'm going to show up, and I recognize the importance of this. When we look at the LGBTQ supplement for the elements of effective practice, also a publication submitted by Mentor that you can also access for free on their website if you look up the LGBTQ supplement for mentoring. We know that programs are offering job descriptions to mentors or understanding that includes the ability associated with being an ally or an advocate to diverse populations of youth, including to LGBTQ youth. And we also make sure that mentors are recruited and trained in ways that we are targeting our outreach to folks who share these identities. So adults who identify as LGBTQ, who might bring valuable lived experience to the mentoring role, and matching those adults with young people who say, I really want a mentor who shares this particular identity with me. When we think about screening mentors, I'll pause and let you hear from a mentor yourself about what her expectation was versus reality, and then we'll chat a little bit more about screening mentors.
And that's really what led me into this. It's like I wanted to make a difference on one person's life. And as it turned out, the person was myself that ended up having the big difference made in my life, because I've always said, I think I have learned so much more from Tara than she's probably ever learned from me. You know, people will say, oh, this is, I really do believe, I mean, like, yes, I've taught her how to use an ATM and things like that, but I think she's really taught me a lot about perseverance and persistence, and really just how to cope when life is really not fair to you. And that's not, I have to admit, not something that I've been very blessed in my life and haven't had to deal with a lot of those challenges. And I think it really opened up my eyes to see, like, wow, life can sometimes be really unfair to someone, but yet, like, they can really bounce back, and it never ceases to amaze me what she can bounce back from. So to the effect that I can have any effect on her to make that any easier, it's, you know, certainly been my honor to do so.
If it was difficult to hear that mentor, she just spoke about really coming to the relationship with an openness to learning and connecting with the young person from whatever way that made sense for the youth. And she mentioned that she learned a lot from the young person, and she was able to teach some tangible skills like how to use an ATM and other tangible things like that. But she also gained a lot from the relationship by allowing that young person to lead the relationship. And this is what we as an organization, the approach that we take. and also recommend for other programs like yourselves, if you're exploring mentor screening, to make sure that mentors are coming into the program with an openness and a willingness to learn from others, and also to really unpack their own identities and recognize how those are influencing how not only they move through the world, but how they are relating to other people as well. When we think about the LGBTQ recommendation for this specific element, one of the pieces that stands out is making sure that mentors do not exhibit homophobic or biphobic or transphobic behavior. So when we're doing our screening as an organization, we're asking questions specifically around what folks' own beliefs are, where they came from. We're doing scenarios that explore a young person coming out to a mentor as either homosexual or bisexual or transgender. And we really assess how are mentors responding in these moments and how receptive are they to feedback and open for growth. Because not everyone just gets it or understands, but we do know that people can be more open to change and to understanding and growth. So when we think about LGBTQ youth, this is important, but also when we think about mentors who maybe identify as white and are mentoring Black and brown young people. So really exploring what are some of their implicit biases and other ways to understand their own identities, and how can we start having those conversations early on during the screening process to make sure youth are matched with a supportive person who can consistently show up for them. The next element is mentor training. And with this piece, it's important that mentors are clear on expectations, not only of what they are looking for, but also that the organization, that being silver lining for us and in whatever program you're a part of, that you're clear on what your expectations are from mentors as well. We also are making sure that we're doing training that is clear on the risk factors and resilience among youth in foster care specifically. The mentors may come into our program having mentored someone else before, but that might have been, for example, in the context of an after-school program with a young person who has two parents at home and can help with homework when the mentor isn't there. And that experience is very different from a young person who may be in foster care going to a placement without additional support when that mentor is no longer available. Also, one thing we caution on is not ignoring the red flags. If mentors are coming in with concerns that raise red flags for you, to really follow up on those proactively so that we don't get down the line where it can do damage to the match relationship. And the last piece is thinking about closure, that we encourage talking about that early on, because particularly for young people impacted by foster care, having a healthy closure is critical to making sure that that relationship was a positive add to the young person's life and did not do more harm. When we think about LGBTQ youth, for not only programming staff, but also for mentor training, there are particular areas that we want to make sure and that we as an organization do make sure we touch on, including definitions related to sexual orientation, recognizing, as Robin shared in the introduction video that I encourage you to watch if you haven't seen it yet, that there are so many terms and terminology and language that keeps coming out that we really just have to stay open and understand that young people are going to let us know how they want us to define them or how they are defined, and we should respect that. We also do training on demographics of LGBTQ youth, so recognizing the numbers of LGBTQ youth, making sure mentors know that they are overrepresented in the foster care system. We also talk about things like risk factors for youth who are at home and in school and in the community, and other topics related to making sure mentors are particularly prepared to support youth in foster care, as well as LGBTQ youth who may or may not be in the foster care system. And this, we'll hear from a young person about what is important for becoming a mentor as well.
I'd say that if you want to become a mentor, I'd say that what you really need is patience, because you can't get offended easily, because some people get offended that people aren't receptive to them right away, and you can't be like that, because you have to understand that the person that you're mentoring doesn't know you, and you have to let them get to know you. And that's what Yvonne did, and that's the reason why Yvonne and I are close. Because if she was pushy from the beginning and she felt like I didn't want to talk to her, then it would have been weird. It would have felt like she was just kind of coming just and it would have felt invasive. But because of the fact that it was kind of at my own pace and we could go through it and, we could have fun and do things that we both were interested in doing, it built a trust. And that's kind of one of the things you need as a mentor, is to be able to be patient and kind of let that person you're mentoring decide the pace of the relationship.
And that young person spoke about deciding the pace of the relationship being left up to the young person. And that is super important, especially when we think about young people feeling comfortable enough to be their authentic selves with mentors. So not only are the essential pieces of this element, which is matching, are meeting young people where they are, so making sure mentors are prepared to let youth guide that relationship. Also making sure that we're communicating with stakeholders, so knowing that for youth in foster care, there may be child welfare workers involved that we need to communicate with. There may be guardians or family units that we need to communicate with. And we recognize that there's an inherent challenge in making sure that everyone is on the same page, or at least informed of what's happening for a young person. And so we have to be particular as an organization in reaching out to all those stakeholders. And also that young people have the final word. We know that mentors can handle disappointment. So really we want to make sure that before we say, hey, X, Y, and Z young person, here's the mentor we want to work with you, we've already done our due diligence to make sure that the mentor is aware of, this is the young person we're considering matching you with. Do you have any questions or concerns that we can support to set you up for success in this relationship? If the young person says yes, that you're a good mentor for me, and then we kind of go from there. So we are training mentors from the start to be open to all relationships, preparing them with things like language and terms so that they are aware of how words like queer may sit with a generation that's different from their own, and also thinking about terms and language related to other isms and social structures that are important to recognize. And a final piece for matching when we think about LGBTQ recommendations is that making sure young people have the possibility to match with folks who have similar identities or who can serve as an ally. At Silver Lining Mentoring, we have our LGBTQ initiative, where mentors can self-identify that they either have an identity that is LGBTQ or that they can be a strong ally for a young person who has one of these identities, and we will match a young person accordingly. If they say, I really could benefit from a mentor who shares this part of my identity, then we work to do that. Similarly, if a young person is a Black young person who says, I really need a Black woman as a mentor, we do our due diligence to match that young person because they've identified that as something important in their match relationship. And the next element we think about is monitoring and support. And we recognize that being able to offer support to mentors and mentees is critical to making sure that match relationships are long lasting. And the way we do that as an organization is providing regular check-ins. So we're contacting mentors to see how are things going. If things are not going okay, we're asking what kind of resources we can direct them towards. We're also checking in to see if they feel equipped enough to ask for help. So while we are checking in consistently, we want them to reach out when they need to as well. We also try to really over-communicate around transitions and crisis. And this is because we know that young people that we serve who've been in foster care really have oftentimes not had adequate information about transitions related to them or crises that impacted them directly or indirectly. So as an organization, we want to be, and we are purposeful about mentors and our staff being in communication around any transitions that may happen or that are coming down the pipe or that we know are in the works already. We also are, with our monitoring and support for match coordinators as staff, are making sure that we're predicting developmental changes and milestones. So for youth in foster care in Massachusetts, we know that on their 18th birthday, they age out of the foster care system and that they have the opportunity to sign in for additional care. So they can opt in to the age of 21, where they'll continue receiving additional supports to help them lead lives that are independent as adults that they wouldn't necessarily receive if they did not sign on for those additional few years of care. So when we as an organization have that information in our back pockets, as young people are approaching age 16 or 17 or sometimes 15 or younger, we're starting conversations with our mentors around, here's this big transition coming up for a young person. Just make sure that they're set up to know how to manage their finances or how to search for an apartment Or are they aware that they can sign in for additional support from the Department of Children and Families in Massachusetts to continue with that transition? We also know that mentors are oftentimes, as you heard in our video, the relationship historian. So for young people who lose a lot of connections with adults in their lives, their mentor can be one singular person who has been there through all of it, who's been there through a lot. So we know that this can look particularly helpful for young people who maybe they've built a relationship with a mentor and now they finally feel comfortable telling that mentor that I'm actually trans and I feel comfortable telling you that I prefer he, him, his pronouns instead of she, her, hers now. So being able to have that consistency in a relationship is beneficial in general, but also so that those huge milestones for LGBTQ youth can be met with a consistent adult support system who really shows up for them. We as an organization also are prepared to direct mentors to resources for LGBTQ youth, whether that be community resources or tangible support, such as where to get medical care that's affirming for all identities. Essentially, any LGBTQ friendly resources and organizations that we make sure we do our due diligence to locate them and point young people in their direction. And what we encourage you all as organizations to do is to know what's surrounding your area as well, so that you can provide that similar sort of support for other mentors or staff members who are working with you. And that final element of effective practice is closure. For young people impacted by foster care, this is particularly important. I've mentioned this a few times and I cannot overemphasize the importance of making sure that youth know that the relationship that they have had with their mentor is uniquely valuable and that it is closing for a reason that doesn't rest only on the shoulders of the young person. So that they end that relationship knowing that this was something valuable to me, to my mentor, to the program that supported us. We'll spend time lifting up here are some of the highlights of that relationship and really want to make sure that that young person feels affirmed and knowing that this is a healthy way to end a relationship and that those healthy closures are possible. To make that possible, we really emphasize do not avoid the conversation. It is really important to talk about it in advance, well before it happens, and really don't allow guilt to drive that conversation. We know from our experience that mentors will sometimes shy away from saying goodbye if they are the ones who need to end the relationship, oftentimes because they just don't know how to do that. So we as program staff are trained to support mentors in those conversations and in closing out those relationships so that they fulfill the commitment that they've given to the young person and make sure that those healthy endings are something that young people can remember. We also emphasize making sure that you're prepared as a match support team member or a mentor to talk about why the match is ending, but also to celebrate all the successes of it, reflection on the relationship as a whole, how you've seen each other grow, because there's inevitably some sort of growth, and lifting that up can really be helpful for young people. Talking about your favorite memories together, your wishes for the future, and really lifting up the high points of those relationships. For LGBTQ recommendation, again from that supplement, is that making sure that within those closure conversations and that entire process, that we really focus on the identity growth during the relationship and recognize that identities shift and identities are not stagnant, they are fluid, and that you highlight and lift up the growth of your identities as well. And the final piece is setting realistic expectations for the future and making sure that young people know if they're going to be in communication, and if not, what the final moment of communication will be, but essentially never, never, never overpromise. And you must be able to say goodbye because too many people in the young people's lives that we support haven't had closure in the past. So we really want to make sure that the young people that we're supporting get a healthy closure from their match relationships. All that boils down to a few different lessons from the field that you see on the screen. A few things that we think about when we're mentor screening is thinking about what we want to notice. So we know that if folks are consistently on time, that bodes well for the relationship. We know that if it's particularly challenging to get in touch with them, that might be a red flag we want to pay attention to. Other things we'll pay attention to are the sort of yes man. We know that it doesn't work to always just say yes, that healthy boundaries and balance are really important, that we want to be screening for that and training mentors to support them and not feeling compelled to always say yes or bend to whatever the will of the young person might be in the moment. We know that shared identity markers may not automatically equal a good match, but in some cases they could be helpful. So if we know that there's an adult who was also a youth in foster care, that could really help as a relationship builder for a young person. We know that if there's a non-binary Black person who is mentoring and a young person holds those identities, that could add significant value just by having that representation. We also recognize on that right side of your screen that there's different match support scenarios that come up where mentors may just be questioning different things. So not knowing like if my mentee is still in need of me, they're getting older and they're more independent, so I don't think this relationship is necessary anymore. And essentially what all these lessons have taught us are that coordinators and staff should all be prepared to have those tough conversations, but also to really take a moment and reflect on where is this coming from, how can I best show up for the young people that we're working with, and how can I center the needs of youth, particularly when thinking about those intersecting identities and how to make sure that we're meeting all of the needs that they are putting out. The last piece, we talked about being able to support your organization if you're looking to improve the support services that you offer for youth in care or LGBTQ youth. And some of the questions that we get fall into a few different categories around sustainability. Questions around infrastructure, wondering if you need to have paid program staff or if you can do it all with volunteers. Wondering if you just kind of was really excited about an idea but don't have the backing of infrastructure behind it, just knowing that that can lead to harmful match relationships. So shameless plug, if you're interested in having support from us, you can reach out on our website and find out more about the Silver Lining Institute and reach out to me, Mobile Burrell, Program Manager, and I can chat with you more about getting support as well. That brings us to the end of our conversation today. Really wanted to make sure you walk away today knowing that mentoring relationships can be critical for youth who've been impacted by foster care systems or other systems as well, and particularly important for those who hold LGBTQ identities. Thank you again for joining us. You can check us out on all the social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. You'll also see my information to the right. Again, my name is Mobile Burrell. I use they, them, their pronouns, just my name, or any pronouns really, just as long as you're respectful. And I'm the program manager of Silver Lining Institute. You can check me out my LinkedIn. You can check me out via email, and feel free to call or text as well. Thank you all, and appreciate you joining this conversation.